some people here who don't know what Wine Champions means, and actually it's a very, very significant thing for us. So it's actually an internal tasting competition which we've run for 20 years this year at the Wine Society. And it started out with Sebastian Payne, who's a master of wine and has been a member of the buying team at the Wine Society since the 70s, deciding that actually it's really important that wine buyers who work with specific regions taste each other's wines from different regions and do so blind. And you can gain so much from that, because otherwise you get so wrapped up in your own regions that you can lose a sense of perspective. And so he did that and turned it into a bit of a competition. And the wines were lined up. It was everything in the portfolio. They were lined up blind and then scored. And the top wines were put into the Wine Champions competition. And now this is something that we've continued for 2 decades. And it's very much the sort of same principle that it was when we started. Now it's a much bigger competition than it was. There's 8 of us who are buyers who judge the wines. And this year we had over 1,000 wines that were tasted blind over about 3 weeks or so, and scored. And the Footbolt was one of the winners. It came out as one of the top scoring wines of the 1,000 tasted, and went therefore into the Wine Champions competition. So we taste in various sort of themes depending on the day. So this was because of the Shiraz component of the wine. It was in amongst our kind of Rhone style red wines. So that included obviously red wines from the Rhone, but also red wines from elsewhere around the world made from Rhone grapes. And we don't really know obviously much about what we're tasting because it's blind. So we do have a bit of an idea of the price, because it's important, I think, to be able to use price as a bit of a benchmark for quality and value for money. And aside from separating Rhone proper from Rhone style wines from the rest of the world, we don't know where they're coming from. So this is a wine that really, really stood out in this tasting. I remember tasting it when I was actually at dArenberg with you, Chester, and it knocking my socks off then and thinking, well, this will be absolutely perfect for our blind tasting, because it's just such a wonderful, generous wine that really leaps out at you. I was really, really pleased, obviously, when it came out on top. It's great to see that it's been so well received by members as well. And I think we're all really, really looking forward to hearing a little bit more about it, Chester. So I'll hand over to you.
Sure. Well, thanks for inviting me tonight. And it's always great to be a part of the Wine Society dinners and functions. And I know I have very fond memories of when we had our 100th anniversary back 8 years ago. And Sebastian opened up a nice my birth year, which, I suppose I can divulge, 1962. We had a 1962 champagne, which was looking special. And I know we had a Rayas. I think it was an 80 Rayas, actually. It was pretty special. But every time I've ever been in your tasting rooms and whatever, talking to everyone there, it's always been fun. And the dinners I've done have been very fun. But I don't know, do you want to hear a little bit about? Do you think everyone knows dArenberg? Should I be talking a little bit about dArenberg first, the history?
It's probably good. Just give a little bit of background, I think. Yeah, that'd be great. It'd be really interesting.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm the 4th generation winemaker here, and my great grandfather started it in 1912. He was a director of Hardy's, treasurer of Hardy's Wines from 1881. There he is on the left, Joseph. And he was director and treasurer of Hardy's. So we've been in the wine industry for nearly 140 years. He was also a great footballer and started the best club with his first captain, present chairman, and big in horses. And actually, he had this stable of horses. And one of the horses he had was Football. This wine, I don't know whether you can see what I'm holding up right now, but I'm sure you know what the label looks like anyway. But Football was one of his horses that he had. He sold all his horses in 1912, or actually 1911, to buy the property in 1912. and football is one of our biggest selling wines and popular wines that we're known for around the world, and it's because of him. It's a tribute to the horses that he sold. I think he was probably embezzling money out of Hardy's because he was best mates with Tom Hardy, and I think Tom died very suddenly in 1911 or 12, and I think they decided to. He had to leave, and then I don't think anyone knew that they were doing that. Anyway, that's another whole story. I've told the Hardy family that they're all fine. They said, "Oh, is there any proof?" I said, "As if." Yeah, that's another story. My grandfather there, Frank built the winery in 1927. With my great grandfather was still there. Joe was still there. We still do everything the same way. We're very, very old-fashioned. Small 5-ton, even 2-ton fermenters nowadays. Like I've got 240 of them going at any one time. It's all submerged cap. It's a very, very old-fashioned French technique of holding the skins down in the ferment. That's what we do all the time, and I love it. I've trialed everything else, and I just love it because it's so seamless and so everything seems to integrate so beautifully. And when you've got really tannic big wines, big grapes with enormous tannins in the grapes, this really works extremely well to give fragrance and fruit and seamlessness to the whole thing. Are you still hearing me? Because I can't see anything on here.
Yeah, we can still hear you absolutely fine, loud and clear.
Oh, cool. That's all good then. And then my father joined the company in 1943. There was only horses, so he was working the whole vineyard, 150 acres with horses, 2 Clydesdales. He got the first rubber-tired tractor in 1948 in McLaren Vale, and he loved that because he could bore up and down the roads and kill all the plants and whatever, which he thought was a good thing. And I came along and eventually told him not to, but that's another story. So I joined the company. I started working in the company when I was 7 years old, got paid 10 cents an hour. Don't think I was worth that much money. I think I ate more grapes than I put in the bucket. But I got a wage rise to 30 cents an hour when I was 8 years old. And I thought I'd better work for that. So I worked half of all my holidays in the vineyard or winery, bottling line, tasting room, whatever, all the time. I finished in 1983. I wrote a winemaking degree at Rosebery College, and in 1984 went to Europe, and I travelled France mostly with 2 other winemakers from Australia, and we really gathered a great knowledge of European wines, which I'd already been gathering, but by being there was a beautiful thing. So you'll notice that my style is very much influenced by the European style, in that it has a elegance and a strength of character, but a long minerality and fragrance, completely integrated. No oiliness, which sometimes some modern world producers do, and this terroir, earthiness that says it speaks from place. The football probably isn't as terroir driven as maybe some of the others, because it's a relatively affordable wine. But then when you drink through, go further up the chain, you start to see earthiness becoming a really big thing in the wine, which is a fun thing. So we're now also organic and biodynamic. We're the largest biodynamic grower in Australia, with 500 acres of vines grown biodynamically. You're putting up all sorts of interesting things I could show you. Yeah, the last picture you said was the first family of wine. So going back to family, since we were family. So we're one of Australia's first family wines. There's 11 members now that are old family companies like Henschke, Yalumba, Tyrrells, Tabilk, and we're all multi-generational, and we get together and do promotions around the world, and it's beautiful that all of us make a wine style that is ageable and isn't that blown out big style. But we all respect each of our terroirs. We all have different environments that we work in. There's none from McLaren Vale other than myself, so it's really cool that. And Langton's here, we're classified as one of the top collectible wines in Australia, and Halliday's given us the 5 red stars, which is only one of 2 wineries in McLaren Vale. So that's very nice of him. But then you have some more pictures that you want to bring up, which I thought was quite appropriate. So you see the vine on the left. Well, it's not much of a vine. This is 100. Well, I suppose it was planted in 1912. What's that make it? 108. And you can't really see the rest of the photo, but we have most of our vineyards are very, very old. So they're from most of the vineyards are 50 to 120 years old, and there's no phylloxera in McLaren Vale. In fact, there's no phylloxera in South Australia. So these vines will keep alive as long as we keep working them properly and keep removing the dead arm disease out of them, which is the dead arm one that we have. And then if you look on the right-hand side, that's the geology map of McLaren Vale, which is quite a diverse region, having geologies that range in the age of 10,000 years to the south to nearly 1 billion years in the north. But actually where dArenberg is, which is in the middle there, we have geologies that I like to work with that are 2.4 million years old to 56 million years old. And these geologies are great because they still have a lot of earthiness and minerality and character. They can be grown without adding any nitrogen at all, no fresh nitrogen, which is important because once you start growing things with water and nitrogen, you start getting a wine that is very much herbal in nature and thin, or you have to get it really right to try and get away from the herbs, but you're still getting herb. You get that thick, lousy, herby, juby, oily thing, and I don't like that. I want to pick the grapes earlier when they're really bright and red and vibrant and flowery, and that the fennel, and you can see that if you're drinking that football, you can see that fennel like long length and spice and elegance and perfume, and this is going to go on. This wine will stay there for years and years and years, and I'm really particularly happy about the dead arm because, of course, it's the same thing with all this volume turned up. And I'm a bit sad though, in that some wine journalists like to talk down 2017, saying, "Well, it was a difficult year and it wasn't that good and whatever." When actually it's a perfect year for us. And vintage was actually 1 year. 1 year. We'll get it right now. Vintage harvesting was 1 month after normal harvest, and so it's more back like what the wines that we made probably from the 60s and 70s, and certainly the 80s when I was making it. This is the sort of characters that I always saw. It's so lifted. Now there is a few other varieties in it. We have there's a little bit of Viognier, maybe 1.5%, my guess, and a bit of Marsanne, Roussanne, very small amounts, and a few other little special bits that I put in there. I put a bit of Sagrantino in there. I know that's sort of quirky, but particularly this year, the Sagrantino works really well in this because it was Sagrantino is a very tannic variety from Umbria, and this particular vintage is so perfumed and so fragrant. It just needs a little bit more tannin, spice, but actually Sagrantino looks like this most of the time. So you don't even know that it's there, and it just lengthens it, which is so much fun. Am I getting sidetracked? Should I start asking for questions?
I think Chester, I think it's fantastic. I think Anna is much more. Anna's much more in charge of the sort of process.
Well, Chester, I've just got a slide. If you might be able to tell us a little bit more about your small batch winemaking process. I've got the slide you shared with us earlier, and that would be fantastic if that's all right. And then I've got a few photos that we can put up, but after that, if you're happy to take questions after that, that would be brilliant.
No, good idea. Yeah, I'm sorry, but I've been out to lunch today, and it was a meeting that went a bit long, and they said, "Well, do you want a glass of Fiano?" I went, "Oh, yeah, fair enough." And then let's have lunch. And we actually, I'm in dispute over the McLaren Vale has the most expensive water in all of the traded water in Australia, and I'm on a mission to change that, and that's what the meeting was about. And we opted into a few glasses of Fiano, and then tonight also there was an announcement of a soup kitchen 5-week-long thing that I was involved in for charity for homeless people. And I went there and had a few drinks, and then came back home, and my beautiful partner had cooked beautiful gnocchi, and I decided to open a beautiful bottle of Ribera del Duero. And then we went to the football. So I might be a little bit enjoying myself a little bit. It's about 9 o'clock at night over here, of course. But anyway, look, so they're all submerged cap ferments that I mentioned, and the skins are held down inside the fermenter. This means that the extraction is very, very gentle. Normally, people will be plunging fermenters with a disc that goes down through and squashes, grinds the skins and the seeds, and you get a mechanical extraction. The skins and seeds pop out really quickly and float on the top. So they do this twice a day, and that's their extraction. Instead, what we do is we have the rollers open. We have all whole berries in the ferment underneath the cap, and right down to the bottom. So these are like 5 foot deep. And the berries, we don't add much yeast, so the ferment is sitting there not really doing much from the beginning. It's only about 15 to 18 degrees. It's just cruising along, sitting there. And then once it starts fermenting, the CO2 being produced pushes up on the skins, the berries, and gradually squashes them over a period of 5 or 7 days. And the juice oozes out through the cap, solvently extracting all the flavour. And they sort of like start going through some sort of carbonic maceration where the enzymes are converting the sugar to alcohol. But as soon as they get soft, because they're pushing up, they get squashed. So they only just start to do that. So there's a little elements of carbonic, but not really strong carbonic character. And then we foot tread it about halfway through the ferment once we get to a peak of 30 degrees Celsius, and then cool it down quickly. We want to mix up the warm skins with the cold juice, put it all back together after we foot trod it. And when I say foot trod, it's really more, we have a lot of juice in there. There's people walking around in there, waiters, and it's very gentle. They're using their knees and whatever. And then I taste it every day. And when the ferment is at the right, the tannin level is exactly like it. At the right point, which is a bit like a tea bag sitting in its water. Then we basket press it, and you can see that basket press there. That is actually one from Yalumba that we bought in 1963. And I actually, funnily enough, I saw Robert Hill-Smith tonight, had a drink with him, and from Yalumba, and he said many years ago he'd like it back. And he's only joking because there's no way he's going to get it back. He's like, they got rid of all their basket presses, but we have 10 basket presses. And they're all everything is basket pressed, and so they go into oak. There's no racking, no filtering, no fining. It's very minimal. The whole process is extremely minimal. And then I go and taste every barrel because they haven't been racked, so every barrel is different, which is fantastic. But the lees that they're sitting on is really quite light because I haven't been plunging. There's no real solids much there. There's a little bit of pulp and a little bit of yeast. And the barrel is oxidative. So the barrel's sucking this oxygen in, and the yeast are scavenging the oxygen, stopping the oxidation. And the pulp is actually adding more minerality, more perfume, and more tightness, and more length to the wine. So this is what works for us. And then I have to taste through all of the many thousands of barrels that we have and decide where they go. And there's 76 wines that they could go into. So it's a complex equation. It's always the best fun time. I start in, well, it depends on the wine. I do a few reds at this time of the year. but really I start in August and finish in February doing the massive blendings, and you can see me there. That's actually a younger version of me. That's he's much more handsome and skinny than me. My new shirt taste is quite poor. I think I've grown into my shirts. All right, so we move to the next slide. Is there another slide?
We've got some pictures, Chester, so I don't know whether you wanted to talk through a couple of the photographs. We've got some amazing pictures. I'll just move back up to, you obviously mentioned the viticulture earlier. I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit more about your organics, etc. If not, we're able to send this presentation around to everyone as well. So up to you. Do you want to talk through this or some photos?
Absolutely, absolutely. There was a picture there briefly you showed of a kangaroo in the vineyard. My father actually said he'd never seen kangaroos in the vineyard because he was cultivating all the time, killing all the weeds and plants. No kangaroos would ever come into the vineyard, so he never saw a kangaroo in the vineyard. Funnily enough, it's this vineyard, exactly this vineyard, and I took this picture of this kangaroo in the vineyard. This is a derelict vineyard of Grenache that hasn't been pruned for many years, like 20 years, and is no cultivation, no spraying, no nothing. So we just go in there and we pick the grapes. We get like quarter of a tonne or half a tonne per acre. This makes the derelict Grenache or the Ironstone or one of the other Grenaches goes into. And there's always kangaroos in this vineyard, and it's so beautiful. The kangaroos, they need to have grass because they eat the grass. They don't care about the vines. They like eating the grass. And I saw a video today from my vineyard manager who showed he walked right up to the kangaroo and just kept eating. They're so friendly. It's ridiculous. They're so familiar with us now. But anyway, so it was the derelict vines that taught me to stop fertilizing in the vineyard and to stop cultivation. So I told my father, I'm not going to fertilize, I'm not going to cultivate, I'm not going to use herbicide, and we're going to stop irrigating where we can. And he said, well, all right, we should sell the vineyard now before all the vines die. So anyway, but he was really surprised. I did it. And he said, oh my God, they're still yielding well, and the quality of the grapes that we made, because this is 20 odd years ago, went through the roof. It was we changed the whole scenario, and I've been a big advocate of this for in McLaren Vale non-stop, and the whole of McLaren Vale has been moving along with me gradually, which is great. But in the next slide, what have we got there next?
Well, we've got a few vineyard shots. This is obviously a lizard as well in the in the vines. But so, we've got a couple of site shots that are really amazing. So if you wouldn't mind, I think there he is. So obviously you've got some bush vines here. If you wouldn't mind talking a little bit perhaps about the difference between the sites. So you've got your bush vines and then your trellis vines. If you wouldn't mind talking a tiny bit about that, that would be amazing. And then maybe a bit more about the new winery that you've built as well, and the cube, and a little bit about that. That would be great. I've got some photos of that later.
I just first of all need to say that I tried to do this connection with the iPad with the connection that you had from last Wednesday with me, and unfortunately that didn't work. So you obviously texted this connection to my marketing guy, and he sent it to me, and he put it on my phone. But my phone only has 10%. So if I die, if I've gone, can you email me the connection, and I can then, the iPad has email, but it doesn't have text, so it's borrowed. All right, so I just need to say. So
my colleague will do it now.
McLaren Vale has masses of bush vines. It's all old vine Grenache. There's very little young vine stuff. It's nearly all dry grown, and this is the beautiful sands of Blewett Springs that are relatively deep sand, a bit of nematode. They don't have much vigor. And we get really beautiful, spicy Grenache. McLaren Vale, where we are in McLaren Vale, is about 1 degree colder than Chateauneuf-du-Pape. So they're redder and brighter and spicier. and because we have a problem with light brown apple moth eating lots of the flowers during flowering, we get really low yields of Grenache. So we make extraordinary Grenaches, and the world has only just started to catch up with that. Actually, the demand for Grenache right now, the price for Grenache in McLaren Vale grapes is higher than Shiraz, and it's a beautiful time for Grenache. We've been doing it. It's been dArenberg. It's been one of our things for years. It's been what we sort of feature, I suppose, and I'd love to be talking about Grenache all the time because it's sort of one of my passions. Mind you, I do make 37 grape varieties, so I'm passionate about all of them. So we might be here for the rest of the day if I do. But,
we could be here a while. And then would you be able to tell us a tiny bit about these plantings, Chester? And then I'll tell you what, after you've done that, I'll let you re-log in because Freddie Bulmer is actually going to talk us through the wine. So if you're happy to maybe just mention a little bit about this vineyard, why it's planted differently, and then we'll let you re-log in and Freddie's going to talk about the football.
Well, the vineyard actually right in front on the right-hand side is actually one of our single vineyard Shiraz wines. You'll notice that there's about 4 rows of Shiraz, and then there's a little triangle block of Grenache to the left of that, which is we just call that the angle rows. It's pretty boring because we don't make a separate one of it. But the 4 rows that you can see go up the hill, and that's the single vineyard Shiraz wine we have called the Swinging Malaysian, because it was planted back in 1969 by my father, and he used little Malaysian posts that were quite tiny, and he called it the Malay block, and I thought, well, it sounds a lot more fun to call it the Swinging Malaysian, because apparently my father and his friends and whatever were into swinging parties back then. Who'd ever guess now? But the vineyard immediately further south, which you see the long rows, is one of the most the best part of the dead arm. It's always gone into the dead arm, and that is the 25 row block. But actually, I call that now the amaranthine block. Amaranthine meaning the colour purple, used in paint blending, whatever, and everlasting. And it's an extraordinary vineyard because it has 3 different geologies, has also many different aspects, as you can see. And then the vineyard slightly to the right is a Grenache vineyard. Both those first vineyards I mentioned were planted in the 1960s, but the Grenache vineyard above there was planted in the 1930s and is sometimes goes into some of our top Grenaches.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chester. I'll let you log in. I think I think you should have hopefully an email connection now. So I'll let you change over on the connection, and I will have a quick chat with Freddie Bulmer. He actually especially has the tasting notes. Am I right, Freddie, from when you originally tasted the wine in Australia?
I do. Yeah, absolutely. So as I briefly mentioned earlier, I was out in Australia. It was actually pretty much this time last year, actually. I wonder if I can... out by a day. I was out there on the 8th of July last year with Chester, and had a fantastic tasting. And yeah, we did a big old tasting of the whole range, and obviously, made various notes on all the wines that we tasted. And I'm sure a lot of people in their tasting books have a different method of, marking which wines really kind of stand out for them. And some people use a scoring system, and some people, I have colleagues who will do sort of A and A++ and B and B- and B+, and all this sort of thing. And for me, it's a much more simple method where if a wine really makes me go, oh wow, that's really good, I put an asterisk next to it. And nice and simple. It's either good enough or it's it doesn't quite do it for me. And at this tasting with Chester, there was quite a few wines that received an asterisk, but really high praise from me is an asterisk and a wow in capital letters or something like that. And this football got both of those. And I found it to be, my tasting notes when I'm actually tasting a wine at a winery and you're going through lots and lots of different wines are somewhat vague sometimes. They don't read in a way which you would hope that our tasting notes on the website do, but it's just really about kind of encapsulating what it's all about for me. So for me, things that struck me were this sort of savory spice. There was almost a kind of a meaty sort of irony kind of note to the wine for me, which I thought gave it some wonderful complexity, some wonderful depth. And Chester talked a little bit about sort of earthiness in his wines, a terroir that he likes to sort of try and get across in his wines. And for me, it had that in abundance, actually. I know that he said that football is probably one of the lesser... Oh, here we go. Here we go. Hello, Chester.
Hey, he's back again. So, Chester, if you turn the sound off on your... or if somebody could mute Chester on one of the devices, that would be fabulous. Do carry on, Freddie. Tasting note.
So for me, actually, yeah, it really did speak of its terroir quite wonderfully, which was lovely. I love this sort of this mixture of, you know, full body. It's a blockbuster wine, but it's still got real elegance. And I got this sort of almost like sort of chutney, sort of preserve kind of a flavor in there too, which was absolutely lovely. I was just looking then at kind of what I'd written as the kind of official tasting note on the system, you know, on our kind of bank of tasting notes that we have on the computer. And I put, it's not hard to imagine why this is dArenberg's best-selling red wine when you taste it, and hopefully everybody else agrees. It's got lots of ripe red and black fruit, pinch of pepper, savory notes, rich texture. But I put, and I think this sort of sums it up, hopefully. It's a 5-star blockbuster wine at an affordable price. And there's a reason why we've worked with this wine for so long. I mean, we go back to, I think 1998 was the first vintage of this wine that we bought, and we bought it pretty much every year since, as far as I'm aware, because it's just always delivered every single year. So yeah, it's a really pleasing, proper Aussie wine.
It's a proper icon. I mean, even Chester mentioned earlier, you know, you might recognize the label. It's a recognizable classic wine. And yeah, it's been a pleasure, I'm sure, for you to start working with Chester anyway. But also, it's always just a pleasure to drink. It's pretty perfect for the weather, actually.
You know, that's a point what you're saying about it being perfect to drink, because I was having this discussion with someone yesterday saying that actually so many wines now are sort of challenging. You know, there's a lot of people setting out to make almost very intellectual, very challenging wines. And it's a bit of a trend, perhaps, because it's important that people remember to make very drinkable and enjoyable wines as well. And this, I think, is an example of a wine which does both. It's not by any means just a simple, straightforward wine. It's got real personality, but it's also got serious drinkability as well. And that's what I think sets it apart.
Fabulous. So we've actually, whilst we just get Chester back, we had got a couple of questions that our honorary Chester is prepared to answer. We do have the head of the tastings department, Tim Schwilk, who has actually donned a t-shirt, a shirt, I should say, a Chester-worthy shirt. He's visited many times, obviously, coming from Australia. So, Tim, you're very familiar with the Cube, the incredible tastings room come art gallery at dArenberg.
So I've had a long relationship with the dArenberg family. One of my first experiences in the wine trade was actually a very long lunch with Chester's father at the old Veranda restaurant. And it was one of those lunches that started at 12 and we were still there at 6 o'clock, tasting through the full range. And it was one of those real moments that spurred me on into the wine trade, and the warmth and the generosity of the family. Certainly you can see it in Chester, but it comes right through the generations.
Absolutely.
I was also there when the Cube did open, just 2 weeks before the grand opening. So I got to go on a tour. It is a rather psychedelic experience, but it's a real landmark for the McLaren Vale region, and the amount of business and the amount of opportunities that it's brought to the region is something that Chester deserves to be very proud of, and can take a lot of credit for what it was aiming to do.
And do you mind if I interrupt you, Tim? We have got Chester back on his new device. He's I believe you're the host, so you may need to make him a panelist. He's come in as an attendee to his own event, which is surely his style. But yes, we have got some questions. I'm going to tee up the first question actually, because I think you're going to be asking it yourself. So therefore it will be easier if I get you guys ready to ask. If you just bear with me a moment, and we'll get Chester in the room and we'll move on to the questions. Sorry about this, won't be a moment. Chester is back in the room. Your microphone should now be working, Chester. Hello.
Hey, can you see me?
We certainly can. You're all good. You're back in the forest again.
Thank you. I am in the forest.
Before we go on to questions, Chester, what's the story behind the forest?
Oh, actually, this is, well, you can see it's quite a big forest. It goes down quite a way. Actually, I'm in a room, which is a studio. I'm in my house in Adelaide, there's a retreat we have out the back, a pool room sort of thing that I can't annoy anyone, be loud and whatever. And I decided to put this big mural on there to give a feature of sereneness and being in a forest, even though you're just in a it's actually 8 beds in a row just right next to me here. Yeah. Sort of quite
amazing. From vineyards to forest, you like to just feel like you're outside all the time. We have a question from, pardon me, it's Martin and Fiona Whitcroft. I don't know whether they have been whether they've been unmuted or not, but I'll ask on their behalf. They notice a number of dArenberg wines vary in percentage of alcohol from year to year, and what conditions have kind of contributed to that over the years?
Yeah, look, they vary a bit. The red wine, if we're talking about red wines, the red wines differ really probably from like 13 to well, sometimes 15.3. I think I don't really go past 15.3. I don't really aim to go past that. It really doesn't matter that much. It really comes down to where the flavours in the grapes are and when I pick them. Like 2010 was a vintage that was perfectly suited to picking at like 12.5 or 13. Beaumain came in at 13.5. Many vintages that I produce are 14 to 14.5 nowadays. That's where they seem to be about right. And I think the hotness can sometimes be a little bit too pronounced above that. Maybe 17, you could have gone a bit further and got them a little bit riper because it's so perfumed and it really wouldn't matter. But they didn't need to be. Everything was right where it was. So, I don't really look at alcohol at all. Actually, when I taste grapes, we've got all these vineyards. We work with growers and my vineyards. When I'm tasting out there in the vineyard, I'm just looking at the flavour. That's it. I do have a refractometer just to guide me in case there's something weird going on. But it's flavour. Flavour is what you need to pick on. And I have my vineyard technical officer with me, and we discuss the whole program for the next year, whether there's problems in parts of the vineyard or not, whether the grower's been doing the right thing, whether you've got irrigation right. All of our trials and practices that we've been doing, are we getting everything right? It's the most important time. It's intense. It goes for a week, months of out there, and then intensity in the winery as well. But it's the biggest buzz. It's like you're drawing a painting, painting a painting for 3 months, or many paintings for 3 months, and you can't get away from it. It's every day you wake up and you go out and then you do it all day, non-stop. Which is what I'd love to be doing in my retirement, is just if I can't make wine, then I'd just love to make sculptures and paintings, which actually is what I was doing over COVID for so many time. I've made so many sculptures, it's ridiculous. And I've got my kids now that they're being paid JobKeeper to be employed, and they didn't like going out in the vineyard pruning because it's cold and they don't weigh anything, so it's too cold for them. I've been getting them helping me out with all these sculptures, and I've got hundreds of sculptures I'm building to go into the dArenberg cube.
Fantastic. Yeah, you mentioned that when we had our catch-up call before this, that you've sort of become a almost full-time sculptor during lockdown. Fantastic. I have a question from, I believe, Cara, and I hope that you're able to unmute Cara and ask yourself. It's Cara and Alan.
I think I've unmuted, yes.
You have, certainly.
Oh,
Hi.
right. Okay, hello. Wonderful speech, Chester, and we're really enjoying your wine, be it very small amount at lunchtime. More tonight, I'm sure. And it was lovely to see a picture of the kangaroo. We haven't been to Adelaide yet. We hope to be soon, but we're just wondering how and whether the fires, the devastating fires that you had in Australia, have had an impact on your vineyards.
Oh, yeah, good question. McLaren Vale was spared completely from the fires, and Adelaide Hills was affected, which is not that far away. Fortunately, we also buy grapes from Adelaide Hills, but the part that we buy from is the highest, coldest part, and that wasn't affected by the fires. So, yeah, we got away with it, other than one grower who has quite a big vineyard of like 80 acres. They lost nearly the whole 80 acres, and we only buy, we used to buy 6 ton of a very weird clone of Chardonnay that they had, which tasted like muscat from Austria. You may have heard it, 71. It's a muscat clone, and it's really quite quirky because it is so muscat-like. It's ridiculous. And I always try to pick it really early, so the muscat is like tight and almost Asti Moscato, like, you know, sort of quite quirky. But I'm getting carried away. Yeah, look, the fires are shocking in the Hunter Valley. They had devastating problems over there. It's really sad there, and the Adelaide Hills. So yeah, we're all feeling for everyone. Most people thought that the whole of Australia's on fire, because when you saw those maps and they're showing you where the fires are and they show the intensities, it just looked like the whole thing. But it's not at all. It wasn't at all. But yeah, there was still a lot of heartache. I shouldn't downplay it too much.
But luckily, perhaps you were spared more than others. I hope again that possibly Reverend Robert Stanier might be able to unmute, but otherwise I'm happy.
Yeah, I think I have.
You have indeed. Hi, Robert. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. My question is, I realise you're in McLaren Vale, but the Barossa and McLaren Vale got really famous for Shiraz 25 years ago. With climate change, will Shiraz still be an appropriate grape for these regions in 20 years' time?
Great question. Look, I suppose Shiraz, some of you may have seen that there is a whole for research just been launched by Wine Research Institute, and has predicted what the weather will be in each of the districts, the 65 different districts of Australia, and we are going to get hotter and hotter. Obviously, they reckon we'll be 3 degrees hotter than what we are now, which puts us about the same as the Riverland, which is where all the commercial grapes come from. Cheaper drinking things, which is a bit of a worry. We've been working with really late ripening grapes that do need heat, like Mencía from Spain, Graciano, even Mourvedre in McLaren Vale is relatively marginal and is only probably just starting to find its temperature regime where it works, because we're relatively cool for Mourvedre. We've got Aglianico, Nero d'Avola, Negramaro. There's all these different varieties that I've planted, all the Portuguese ones, Tintacal, Sazao, Touriga Nacional. These are all varieties that are actually quite marginal right now in McLaren Vale, and actually have will come into their own. So I suppose we'll have that. But your question was more about Shiraz, and I do have obviously a strong passion for Shiraz. We make 20 single vineyard Shiraz wines that are all over $100 a bottle. They're all components of the dead arm, actually. We don't make them every year. We make like 12 to 15 of them, and we keep 6 or so barrels separate, and the rest go into the dead arm. So they're really quite special wines. You guys should get on board with them. because they show an enormous expression of exactly that little tiny plot, and every single geology and soil and aspect and age of vine has a major impact in the dArenberg wine that we make. So it's always a fun thing, and I don't want to lose it. I really don't want to lose it. It makes me feel horrible at the fact that it's changing. So I'm doing every single thing I can do to try and delay that. So we're actually trialing. My first trials were this year, just gone, with a shade cloth under the vine to block out the weeds, and then when the heat comes, we put the shade cloth over the top of the vines with a tractor regime that we could do relatively cheaply, and just shade them when the heat's on. Now, I didn't have any white shade cloth, so I used black and green, which is the normal shade cloth you can get, 90%, whatever. And the black, of course, just made them fry, because it's heat. So this year I'm going to try white, and that hopefully will work well. But also the humidity, because it's so dry when these things come, is that you can put in a line, a sort of misty line thing halfway between the dripper and the cordon, and get a bit of humidity in there, and that would help also. So especially if we're covering it over, and so these are tricks that we can hopefully keep Shiraz there growing for longer, and actually it could even be better. Shiraz may make some amazing great wines because of that.
Fabulous, thank you very much. Yeah, we certainly hope that we'll be drinking your Shiraz for a long time, so get those white cloths at the ready. We had an email from Paul Jennings, and I will ask Paul on your behalf, as it was via email. He said that a few years ago you said that bottles of the same wine under screw cap and under cork, and that the bottles under screw cap were on average better. Is that still the case, and have you noticed any other patterns of aging that reflect the type of closure used?
Well, not on average, just always. The screw cap's always better. Yeah, look, if you've got a whole case of wine that is under cork for 10 years, and then you open up every bottle, the whole dozen bottles, yeah, the one that is the best is the one that let the least amount of oxygen in and didn't have any cork flavour. And if you're the screw cap of the same wine, it's actually fairly close to the one that is with the cork, but even better. It's just even better because there's actually zero cork flavour. So it's a quirky thing. But as a winemaker, I put this wine into the bottle that I want it to be like the wine that I made, and then it goes into a random environment that gets modified by tannin from the wood, and it might be peppery, it might be spicy, it might be smelly, corky, underarmy. It can be all sorts of things. So it's amazing how many characters you get from. And then, it's a cork character. And then oxidation, which is the bigger problem that not many of us talk about. We often, I'm sure all of you have opened up bottles of wine going like, oh, that was a bit unfortunate. And you've been around with friends and you've gone, the last bottle of this I was quite happy with. And this one, oh yeah, it's just not working for you. And you've gone, oh, maybe it's just me. Because you know how we differ from day to day a little bit with our taste buds, but actually cork is more variation than that.
Okay, good. We had Dave from Esperão on yesterday, and I think he'd disagree with you there, but he's certainly living in the cork capital of the world in Portugal, so he might be inclined to disagree.
I need to qualify that a little bit in that Australia, for some reason, got the worst corks. We were given the worst corks. I think there's that's a bit rude of me to suggest this, but there may be a little bit of negativity to Australia wine industry in that we were being a little bit good at our game and starting to sell wine over there. Oh, look, it's probably me being just being. But no, corks here. I open cork wines from Europe all the time, and I'm most of the time very happy with them. But I tell you, I open the cork wines that we get, and I go, no, we're not happy with them.
Absolutely. No, that's fair enough. Speaking of sort of closures and keeping wine as well, we have had a lot of members ask some more specific questions about their wines that they've got, but generally for the wines that you have at the Wine Society, do you have rough keeping ages? What would you recommend?
Yeah, so I always say for all of the red wines that I make is that their best drinking time to start is when they're 8 years old. And I know this 17 football, you could easily drink it now. It's like really perfumed and it's beautiful and everything's fine. And it'll be even better in another 2 or 3 years. And then it's like 6 years old, whatever. And then it'll have it take on another whole layer of McLaren Vale character with another couple of years. And that's the way I make wines, is that they have a certain reductiveness about them that keeps them for a long time. And some people people who are sensitive to reductiveness will notice it in this wine. They'll see it as a slight metallic like note at the end, go, it's a little bit hard, amongst it. But I actually like that because it's like it's like a fake tannin almost, and so I'm quite fine with that. The 8 years, and then for the great vintages, which I think actually 17 is an extraordinary vintage that will last for many, many years, and I think 40 or 50 years for this vintage. Well, you never really know. You never know what the great vintages are until they're old. It's like there's many Bordeaux vintages that people have said this is the greatest vintage ever. And you're like, no. Like 89, I remember drinking the 89s, which they said was a great vintage. And then I tasted all the super seconds when they were 20 years old, and they were already starting to fall over a bit. And the next year I had all the super seconds of the 88s. And the 88s were, I thought, much better wines, more tannins and whatever. They never got rid of it. We as journalists and as wine critics, we can only guess. But there's too many quirky things that happen in a vineyard of what type of phenols and mineralities and things that play and that actually decide what is going to be the greatest vintage. 1996 was a vintage that when I put them together, I went, they're really lovely wines, nice balance, whatever. I don't know, just threw them together. Didn't really think about it much. Just did the blends. And I didn't think they had a lot of presence necessarily, but I made the wine anyway. And they have aged so gracefully, so beautiful. They're so like seamless and long. And funnily enough, 2006 is a similar vintage. And then 2016, which we've only just moved away from, has a similar purple-like fruit, a certain amount of minerality, but is much, much more tannic. But I see similarities to it. Sorry, someone's saying something.
No, that's fabulous. I mean, we're going to try and squeeze in one more question. I appreciate it's 1 o'clock and a few of you might be running off, but we'll try and squeeze in one more before Freddie wraps up. So Roland, I'm hoping that you are around and available to ask your own question.
I am indeed, and thank you, Anna. Chester, firstly, lovely to see you again. We saw you when we came down to dArenberg's in 2007, and we saw you when you came to Glazier's Hall in London. 2 questions.
I think I've seen you many times. That's only the last few you mentioned.
Okay, it's a bit longer than that, I'm afraid to say. We're drinking the 2009, and it's wonderful, and it's as fresh as a daisy, and it needs more time. 2 questions, both linked. How's Dad, and who's following you?
My father is he's getting older. He's 93. He's slowing down a fair bit. He still goes to work every day, but his mind is starting to go a little bit. Like he repeats himself a few more times than he used to. He even says he forgets people's names now, which I've said, shit, welcome to the club. And he's got a bit of a frame. He walks around with a frame a bit now, but he's still driving. Still goes down to the post office and things. But yeah, no, he's still all right, but he's fading quickly, unfortunately. And then who's following me? I have 3 daughters, all very interested in wine, as in drinking it, as young people are today. But also my youngest daughter, who is in year 12, has been committed to being a winemaker for the next, for last 8-9 years. So she wants to go into winemaking next year. My middle daughter, who went off and studied exercise physiology, gave that up, and she's now going to do winemaking. And my eldest daughter, who's been doing nutrition, has given that up and gone away from being a vegan. Now she eats meat and all sorts of things. So she's really had a world change, and also wants to be a winemaker. So they're all going to start the winemaking degree together, which is pretty quirky. But you know, the 2009 vintage dArenberg has a lot of similarities and characters to this wine. I think the 2017 is going to be a better vintage, but the 2009 had a beautiful rhubarb-like character, which is really there's a lot of rhubarb in this wine as well, in the 17 football and the 17 vintage as a whole. But there was 2009 was a big change for us, because before then we had the Demoiselle Crusher from Burgundy, which was all going well and whatever. I quite liked it compared to the old Beta Crusher before it. But when I changed in 2009 vintage with the Velo, a modified Velo Crusher, that we sort of had softer fingers on it, we could leave the grapes in contact with the skins for an extra 20% longer, and to get the same amount of tannin, because we were breaking the seeds and the stalks and whatever, and we got more of the skin tannin. And all of the wines from 2009 onwards all aged so much more gracefully, and they have more minerality, and they just keep opening up, and they're just not aging. So that Demoiselle Crusher was breaking the skins and the stalks, the seeds, the stalks and the seeds, and was making a clumsiness in the wine that made it look old prematurely, slightly, compared to what we do now.
Chester, thank you so much for this. This has been absolutely brilliant, fascinating to hear you talk, and it's great to see you again almost exactly a year on from when I was with you, because I can't remember if it was when you had to jump off the call, but it was a year ago yesterday that I was with you at the winery tasting, and it's been fantastic. It's been great to see you again. I was thinking just a minute ago about the visit when I was with you, and obviously I've known your wines for quite a long time because we've worked so closely with them at the Wine Society. But it was the first time that I visited you when I was with you last year. And I remember walking away from that just thinking, oh, wow, that was bloody brilliant. Because I would urge anybody who's not been, if you get the opportunity to go and visit the Cube, go and see it all for yourself, it's so worth doing, because it's just brilliant, fascinating, and fun. And I think that sort of summed up this presentation for me as well, Chester. Brilliant, fascinating, and fun. So thank you very much.
We didn't even get to the old dead arms, or here's the football. Here's the football, the toilet roll holder.
We'll have to. I think we could do a whole session just on the props, probably, couldn't we? So we'll have to put that in. But Chester, thank you. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in as well to join us this lunchtime. It's been great to have you all along, and thank you ever so much to Anna and the tastings team for getting this organised. So Chester, I will raise a glass to you this evening. I'm going to hold off until the evening time, and hopefully I will see you again in the not too distant future.
Hey, cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers, and thank you.
Very enjoyable. Cheers. Thanks. Well done. Oh, there it is.